Leonardo da Vinci usually gets the epithet the Renaissance man, the titular Renaissance man, for his many diversified interests and accomplishments in the many fields that he worked in. But Michel de Montaigne probably exemplifies its greatest intellectual impulse. His mind is a ridiculously rich and fun place to be, and he shares this through the essay. Certainly, expository writing had existed for quite a long time, but he really raised it to a new level with this form that it wasn't really such a formalized thing. The personal essay, as we would know it today, begins with him, and it's simply a tracking of his mind, his thoughts, his noodling around with an idea. The word itself, essay, largely comes from him, and it means to try out, to just, pick up an idea and play with it and see what it can, what can it yield, what can it suggest, where can it lead. They are, by many modern standards, often very digressive and unfocused, it would seem, in the way they meander around. And, a modern editor would probably be very censorious of him and try and struggle him back into a single, more objective line. But that is kind of beside the point with him. The point is often the digression, is the way his thoughts just sort of wander around and circle back and take these elaborate patterns, because that is what thought is. That is what an open thought process does. It is not particularly organized. It's not especially pretty. It goes all over the place, and his essays do. But they are not in any way, shape, or form undisciplined, because you can see in the way he sidles up to an idea, there is a deliberation there. There's a focus there. There is a slow and intentional peeling of the onion that is the mind of the Renaissance, that is the human mind in general. And he offers that to us. Now, he was writing in the 1500s, the late stage of the Renaissance, essentially. High Renaissance, late Renaissance, however you really want to calculate it. But the ideas had been circulating for quite a while, and he was raised in that tradition. Latin was his first language, I believe, and so he had a automatic appreciation and knowledge of the classics that so made the rebirth period what it was. He was raised, he came from a wealthy background, raised around Bordeaux, and he was educated, and he always had a nice house, the tower of which, we'll get to that, still stands today. And he served a couple of terms as his town mayor, giving himself a little bit of a worldly political bent, that helped perhaps reinforce his natural temperament, which is to seek compromise, to seek a middle ground, to not be particularly dogmatic or extremist in any way, shape, or form, and to just give everybody a fair shot, and to look at the world as if there were opposing ideas that might not all be so black and white. There were always some shadings in there. There's always some nuance that his natural temperament, again, was able to see. He was open to it. And he, through his writing, while not telling people to be that way, through his writing, he exemplifies it. He demonstrates it. And he provides a rich example for us all to try to live up to. He at a certain point, he did start writing. It wasn't necessarily a lifelong ambition. The details of his early life are all a little vague. We don't have terrific records from pretty much for anyone from that period. He just started grinding these things out after a while when he decided to go into a period of some retirement. The famous quote for him was something he put on a placard, apparently on the wall of his tower. Every day he would go up in this beautiful, essentially castle that he inherited from his family, and he would climb up to the 3rd floor where he had a little study, and he would sit there. He would have his books around, and he would write. And on the wall, apparently, he had the phrase "que sçay-je," and that translates from Renaissance French as "What do I know?" Which is an interesting question. It's an interesting starting point, because he was really trying to think in a very foundational way, in a way he learned arguably from the classics that he so loved and knew inside and out. He was a big fan of the Platonic dialogues, and his hero was Socrates, and the way Socrates always circles around an idea and questions it from all different sides to try and get at the nub of it, to try and assess what's once you strip away all the garbage, where's the real value there? That's what Socrates did for his entire life, according to Plato, and that is what Montaigne does. He is constantly circling around different ideas and giving a sense of, what is their validity as an idea? What are the opposing ideas? What is the conflict between them? What can we learn about each idea by contrasting them like that? And that ethos, what do I know, resonates. It's just a short step from there to a couple generations later. You get cogito ergo sum, and the further extraction of that notion of trying to get down to what can we be certain of? What is absolute? Is anything ultimately knowable at all? He offers that. Montaigne starts that process. Montaigne gives you the sense as you read that anybody can do this. He is enormously learned. He was very well read, and he tosses out references and quotations that many scholars have had a lot of fun going and searching out and realizing, well, he's a little sloppy with them here and there. He wasn't necessarily quoting anything particularly accurately, and it's kind of a fool's errand to take that too seriously. But the breadth of his references, the number of them, the classical, the contemporary, the anecdotal, people he just happens to know tell him something, and that quotation gets cited right next to something from Seneca or Plutarch or Homer, and it's all this goulash of humanity that we have before us, and he's not necessarily discriminating or prioritizing one from the other. You can just go through his mind as it sifts through everything he knows to try and find, what is of value, what is interesting, what is the truth, what do I know? He says at the very beginning of his essays, he wrote a short introduction of sorts, which he titled Lecteur, to the reader. And you get a sense of his personality, which is essential for understanding throughout, because if you just pick up the essays and start reading cold, you're not going to necessarily understand some of the humor in there, because there's a lot of humor. He is a very funny man. But Lecteur, this book was written in good faith, reader. automatically sounds a little defensive. It warns you from the outset that in it I have set myself no goal but a domestic and private one, which is automatically a little confusing, because if it's just supposed to be a private concern, he's only writing for his private use, then why am I personally reading it? Perhaps he's not being particularly honest on this. Maybe he's being a little coy. Maybe he is hinting that, oh, no, this is just for me. He's just trying to tease your interest a little bit more. He's probably doing all of that. I have had no thought of serving either you or my own glory. Okay. My powers are inadequate for such a purpose. There's a bold statement right there. Again, enormously learned man, and he's saying, no, I'm not that smart. Well, there's a rhetorical word for that, which I'm not going to bore you with, but this is a fairly standard classical way of endearing yourself to a reader and getting them to go along with you a little bit, saying, I'm not good enough to say what I'm about to say, but here I am saying it. Homer does it, for God's sakes. My powers are inadequate for such a purpose. I have dedicated it to the private convenience of my relatives and friends, so that when they have lost me, as soon they must, he's writing this in the second half of his life, they may recover here some features of my habits and temperament, and by this means keep the knowledge that they have had of me more complete and alive, which is sweet. It's very touching that he wants to leave this for his grandkids, that he wants to be able to reach people on a human level. That's important here. If I had written to seek the world's favor, I should have bedecked myself better, which is, I should have dressed myself up a little. I should have made myself look a little bit better, which is inarguable. He sometimes gets a little silly in this, and it's not necessarily very austere and august and all of those things that you expect of the great works of Western literature, but it's very human, very endearing to just say, yeah, I could have, I can't, and should present myself in a studied posture, very serious. I want to be seen here in my simple, natural, ordinary fashion, without straining or artifice. No artifice. Artifice is bad. The Renaissance is about trying to get to natural perceptions, and without coloring them too much. And here he is saying that he is going to try and do that too. But by saying he's trying to do that too, it is automatically emphasizing that, well, he's kind of doing that. He is writing this, and he is writing this for different purposes than maybe we have full access to if they are private. So we don't really know. So we can't take him at his word for anything. But when somebody tells you that they shouldn't be believed, that we can't necessarily take their word for something, doesn't that make you inherently trust them just a little bit more? It puts you in that weird position, but it engages you. It doesn't make you a passive, just, oh, okay, now I believe him. No, I guess I don't believe him. It makes you a part of the process of trying to judge for yourself what he is saying. For it is myself that I portray. Boom. Myself. Little egocentric here, kind of drawing on, again, like the tradition perhaps started by Augustine with his Confessions of just portraying yourself and doing it perhaps as an exemplum, but this seems somehow much more modest, because Augustine was doing it as a confessional narrative, as a tool for conversion, if anything. But here it's much more human. My defects will here be read to the life, and also my natural form, as far as I portray for the public has allowed. Had I been placed above those nations which are said to live still in the sweet freedom of nature's first laws, we'll get to that one, of nature's first laws, I assure you I should very gladly have portrayed myself here entire and wholly naked. He probably means naked in a figurative sense of, being natural man and not putting up any artifice, but still, I think he's playing a little bit with that word right there. I think he's saying, take a look at me, let it all hang out. Thus, reader, famous line, I am myself, the matter of my book. You would be unreasonable to spend your leisure on so frivolous and vain a subject. Yeah. Again, he's sort of playing that line of, I'm so humble, it's just all about me. But in that, you can read so much more. It's because when he says that, he knows that it's not just all about him. It is about so much more. It's about everything and everyone. And you would be a fool to just dismiss it as, well, it's just about me. This goes on for a long time. This is the full thing. And it goes on. So he finds all of this in himself. His own mind, his own turns of mind, his own opinions about things, his own assumptions about things, his own changing assumptions about things. The mind is infinite. He knows that. He's not saying his is any different than yours or mine. He is saying that the mind is infinite. It's complex, often quite ridiculous, but we can go on that journey. We can take that step and start to analyze our own minds because we can, because it's the right thing to do, because if you don't know thyself, as Socrates, his great hero, said, if we don't know ourselves, then sçay-je? What can I know? What do I know? Montaigne takes that journey and invites us all along, and that is fun. Along the way, he has influenced at this point how many generations of essayists. You cannot open a newspaper without seeing the opinion page, which are essentially just essays, op-eds of people who are going and trying to just say, well, what are my 2 cents? And that's Montaigne. That is Montaigne just trying to give a sense of the world around him by looking at it through his own eyes and reporting what he sees. Sometimes it's a little disingenuous. Sometimes he seems to have a very specific ulterior motive in what he's writing. You can never quite trust him, but you cannot take anything in the world on faith, is what he's believing. He is by natural constitution a skeptic, and he is trying to encourage all of us to see the world for all its richness, for all its complexity, and to deal with it on that level. Sçay-je? What do I know? It's a starting point. And the journey ahead is, it's a wild ride.